Our next panelist is Kim Fletter, and she's going to be speaking on the dangers of socialism. Kim is a constitutionalist, researcher, political, and Christian activist. Kim is also a member of several North Georgia patriot groups. Kim is dedicated to protecting U.S. sovereignty, state sovereignty, individual rights, and religious freedom. Kim is the published author of Love, Life, and the Shadow of Death. In 2010, Kim attended a monthly in-depth lecture series on the United Nations and communist infiltration into America for 6 months by Major Curtis Tomlin, U.S. Army retired, who served on President John F. Kennedy's personal battle staff. Major Tomlin was trained by FBI agent W. Cleon Skousen, who wrote the books The Naked Communist, The Naked Capitalist, and The 5,000-Year Lead. She continued Major Tomlin's research to expose how the greatest country in the world could lose its God-given rights, power, and sovereignty, and decided to share this agenda to show how we got here, our current status, and their future plans. Kim has been educating citizens since 2015 on UN treaties, agencies, organizations, and vehicles used to implement UN goals, the Interfaith Initiative and infiltration into the church, regionalism, Common Core curriculum, and sex education, refugee resettlement and population redistribution, nationalization of police, fire, emergency management, agritourism, sustainable development, in other words, smart growth, and human rights and more. In other words, governance versus government. So we're very proud to have
socialism is a socio-economic system, and it dispels class distinction, giving control to the state. So basically what it deals with is inequality. This doesn't sound right. Is this better? So I think we all know that in our culture today, everything that we're dealing with as far as socialism, as far as inequality, tolerance, all the racial divide, and everything that's being, the races, the classes, rich against poor, minorities against majorities, everything that we're dealing with, our system has been actually socialized. And when you start studying the Common Core curriculum and how we have dumbed down our our society, and I can't go there tonight, but I'm going to stay focused on socialism. Let me just go over just a few things about socialism regarding inequality. Teen Vogue magazine, which is the daughter of Vogue, said, quote, "The goal of socialism is an egalitarian society run by democratically elected reps for the benefit of all." And that's basically what we're dealing with, is social justice, social equity. You cannot legitimize the heart. You cannot. All of our rights were given by God. And what they're trying to do is coming right out of Marx and Engels. And when you look at what Marx and Engels stands for, it's called dialectic materialism, also known as scientific socialism. And so we are a social experiment. Let me just tell you, this emphasizes the importance of real-world conditions in terms of class, labor, and socioeconomic interactions. Now, I study everything United Nations, and I find it very interesting that one of the 6 main arms of the UN is the Social and Economic Council. And so everything that we're dealing with as far as economics and in our social system is coming right out of the communists that are behind the United Nations. And you say, oh, Kim, the UN doesn't have any teeth. Well, it does, because they have put their policies through our own hand, through our own governments. And as long as you're a signatory government with the United Nations, which we are, you are going to adopt their policies. And most all of our presidents have helped us get here, some a lot worse than others. But getting back to studying socialism, because we have so many social democrats in our face now, we have the international groups called the socialist and communist parties. Basically the Bolsheviks, if everybody remembers the Bolsheviks. They meet at the United Nations. That tells you a lot. Under them is the DSA, which is the Democratic Socialist of America. And of course they have tons of splinter groups. Trevor Loudon came and spoke to us from across the globe. And he said, folks, why would I come across this globe to tell you about socialism and how the communists have infiltrated your government and are? You could have heard a pin drop in the room. And he said, because if America goes down, the whole globe goes down, the whole world. And the socialists know it, and they are on steroids. Now, here's a few excuses that they give to support their ideology of socialism. Number one, the 1% exploit all. It's always about the 1%, the rich. Whites have unfair advantage. I have never in my history seen so many times where I, as a white person, am being pitted against everything and everybody. Number three, workers exploited by their business owners. Really? That's why we have to have the minimum wage raised and all the other things that we're dealing with workers and fairness and all the rights, the human rights. By the way, the human rights is put in at the UN level and also on the state level. And I encourage everyone to watch the legislature for the Georgia House next year, because there is a bill that is very concerning. I think it's passed the House, and I think it's going to the Senate. It's Senate Bill 426. But it has to do with tolerance and your rights. And that it's coming that you will be arrested for things that you say. Number four, the justice system favors the rich, doesn't it? Number five, conservative Republicans are Nazis. Number six, freedom of speech is a cover for hate and intolerance. Number seven, last one, having wealth is unfair. So we have to spread that wealth, don't we? Well, guess what? Worldview matters. Your worldview matters if you have God in your view or if you do not, because all the isms are all socialism, communism, Marxism, all of the isms are coming right out of this. Marx and this dialectic, dialectic materialism. Now, worldview matters. So all of them are in the other camp. They don't have God in their life. So it's dog eat dog, right? Now, there's a quote by Ignacio Salone. Revolutions, plural, revolutions like trees must be judged by their fruit. Now let's just take a quick look and speak to what he just said about guns. Makes perfect sense, because when you go back to the French Revolution, we're going to talk here about a society falling because they could not defend themselves, and for other reasons. But French Revolution, we had the Germans, 50 million were killed under Nazi Hitler. Russia, we had 3 million under Lenin, 60 million under Stalin. In China, under Mao, we had 65 million. Now, this is according to a black book of communism. Under Cuba, we had Castro, Zimbabwe, Mugabe, and Cambodia, Pol Pot. Now, people say Scandinavia is a great country. Let's go to the Scandinavian countries. It's ideal socialism, isn't it? Well, let's look at it for a minute. They have what is called Healthcare Central. You have to go to Healthcare Central to get an appointment before you can even see a doctor. Get on the schedule. Then it might be another couple weeks. Then it might be another couple months to get into a specialist. People are dying. You know, I have a new saying that says, you can tell how great a country is by how many people are dying to get in and how many people are dying to get out. Let's take another look at the Scandinavian countries. Since they're so great, we should all want to move there. But Bernie and AOC and all the other socialists in our Democratic Party and Republican Party are going to change things for us. They're going to make it better. We're going to become like Scandinavia, right? Now, let's just look at a little bit about Denmark. Has a 55 to 61% income tax, 25% VAT and sales tax, and that includes your food. The other two countries in the Scandinavian realm are, I think they're around 15 and 12%, which is still high. But then you have to pay 180% when you purchase a vehicle. Sounds fair, doesn't it? Let's all take care of one another. Now, I started looking at some of the differences between socialism and capitalism, because capitalism is such a hated thing anymore, right? I thought, well, if it's so hated, let me look at the socialist countries and see. So I started looking at the opposite. We have a constitution with laws, and we're protected under those laws. Under Socialism, you have no rights. You have surveillance. You have a social credit score in China. And guess what? If you don't walk so many steps, your country is raiding you. And they will cut off your rent, cut off your food, cut off your transportation availability, and your picture will be put up on a billboard in the square as a social picture for all to see that you're a bad person. Number two, religion. We have religion in this country, right? Freedom of religion. In a socialistic country, it's nationalized and it's controlled. And most of the time, Christians are killed. Let's look at food for a minute. You have food, all right? There's a story in one of the countries where, under communism, they had to walk to 3 cities just to get a potato. We have everything at our fingertips here in America, don't we? Healthcare. We talked about that just a little bit, but I'll quote Cuba. Let's look at Cuba for a minute. They have a doctor that works for an entire month, and she gets $28 a month. Now, tell me what kind of care you're going to get for $28. They have, you also look at Charlie Gard in Britain. What happened to him? They pulled the plug. Wouldn't let the poor child out of the country. You have reduced innovation. Where's your creativity? It stifles it. You have education. Great thing in our country. Let's see, with your education, we're dumbed down like I talked about. You also have what is called the workforce development. Under socialism, you take the students and you are taking them out of the innovative picture, and you're putting them in the workforce development because they're going to be factory workers. That is a socialist goal, is to be factory workers, if you don't get shipped to Siberia or murdered. And that's a given. Look at your energy in this country, okay? Under energy, under the new, socialistic country, we're going to have great energy, aren't we? Everything's going to be windmills. So we're going to get to ride our bicycle and walk everywhere, and have possibly everybody's going to drive a smart car. That takes your innovativeness away about what you talked about, purchasing a weapon. Everybody has a different like, right? And then look at retirement. We have retirement in this country. Do you think socialist countries have retirement? Look at Cyprus. Look at what happened in Cyprus. They took 10% right off the top out of everybody's account. Now, we also have what is called civil forfeiture. So if you put any amount of cash in your bank account, guess who has to report it? To the government, to the IRS, your bank. And they've lowered that rate, that amount, I am told. So I think we're already on our way to socialism and this surveillance state if we do not wake up. And it is incumbent upon our younger generation especially to wake up and understand these things, because history does repeat itself. And if we do not have the right to defend ourselves at the box with our voice and with a weapon to defend for our lives, we will go down. And so I just ask that the younger generation, please don't buy the lies that the left and the socialists are telling you, because every time I research and I go on a website, it is full of evil things about capitalism and great things about socialism. And so we just need to really wake up. And thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fletter. Any questions from the audience? Mr. Inglis?
I wanted to remind Ms. Fletter about this magazine.
I'll mention it. We don't have anyone in the audience to give it to tonight, but since we have a listening audience online, we actually have a free publication that the John Birch Society has created, and it is a special report specifically on socialism, and it's called Socialism Jackpot. It's an excellent magazine, and we bought 40 copies to distribute tonight for free for anyone who might want some.
Very good. We'll be able to do that. Yes, ma'am. You had a question?
Yes, I do. I have a comment and a question at the same time. I wonder why people do not wake up and start strongly objecting and campaigning against our educational system. Because I am in the local schools all the time, and I see these kids that cannot read, but they already have some very heavy indoctrination every day. And so it starts in kindergarten. It starts with all of this drag queen and miscellaneous artificial stuff that they're promoting out there. It starts with the fight against life at every level, from abortion to homosexuality to 15 genders to euthanasia to you name it. So I'm very concerned about our young people because they have been fed for probably the last 20 years at least, but probably more likely 50 years. They have been fed a steady diet of pro-socialist, pro-egalitarian mumbo jumbo. And one thing that really concerns me, and I'm not sure why this is happening, is that people from the outside can see more clearly what's happening in our country than people from the inside. I'm talking about Trevor Loudon and Dinesh D'Souza and people that come from other countries that are very concerned about our constitutional republic. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Well, I have a degree in education, so I can kind of answer, having looked a little bit on the inside at least. I think that to answer your question, that it might be appropriate to kind of compare what's going on with the Boy Scouts of America. 100 years ago, the Boy Scouts of America was compared by many as almost like a paramilitary organization. I mean, it wasn't quite that far, quite that extreme, but it truly prepared young men to become leaders, to exist in society as people who would stand out, who would serve their community, and who would have the skills to go on to survive on their own if they needed to, and to help their fellow man. But if you look at what's happened in the Boy Scouts the past 5 years, I mean, you see in 2014 the repealing of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. In 2017, the inclusion of biological females, thus creating a co-ed environment. 2018, you see the word safe space appearing in the training manuals and the youth protection and things like that. And you just see this sudden decline of Boy Scouts, and that's what made me get out. Ultimately, was just now the most recent thing being the absence of Christianity. I was threatened with termination because I read from the Bible in a scout camp. And I think that the reason that that has been able to exist in an organization like Scouting that formerly trained young men to become real men is because of apathy and misconceptions. And so I think that the reason that Scouting has gone the way it has is the same reason that education has gone the way it has. A lot of times I fear that parents just don't care. They trust our teachers, and most teachers are good teachers. I would say that, you should always feel comfortable leaving your kids in a classroom, but also as parents, you need to take a vested interest of what's going on in the classroom. And a lot of times they're not doing that. And I think that that's why education is increasingly becoming indoctrination centers. Because, again, just parents don't seem to care about what's going on in their children's lives.
Thank you.
I share the lady's concern about education. And I think where we have failed as conservatives is abandoning the fight in the universities and colleges for the liberal professors who are indoctrinated. They're not educating our students. Not when you send a kid off to college, you want to get him or her to get an education in the subject matter of the courses they take. They're not getting an education, they're getting an indoctrination into a liberal agenda. And that's where, as conservatives, I think we have got to re-engage. That's why I promote and try to promote the college Republicans and have them expose that liberal indoctrination that they're getting in these colleges, because it's
Well, again, my question is, where are the young people?
But like I say, we lost that battle, or we're losing that battle unless we become re-engage on the college, certainly the college level, to stop this liberal indoctrination, go back to educating our kids in the subject matter of the courses that they take.
To answer your question, where are the young people? I think that I'm very grateful for all of you who are here tonight, but I mean, I honestly do wish that there were more of my generation here. I mean, there's two people who are in college right now with us tonight, and one of them's running our sound, and the other one's the other one's sitting in the back. I think that one reason that I think that the reason there's not a lot of young people here with us tonight is the same reason that I have trouble recruiting for the Young Republicans, and the same reason that young people in general don't seem to be interested in politics. We have allowed ourselves as a society to distance ourselves from politics. It's something you don't talk about. It's something that you don't talk about because you might offend someone. And I think that that's just such a disservice to so many people, because as a result of this mentality of not talking about it, of not getting involved, we've allowed for these liberals, these communist socialists to infiltrate our schools, to infiltrate our society, because people don't know, because they don't want to talk about it. And I think that that's a huge disservice. And I honestly think that movements like that stem from, like Kim Fletter was saying, this socialist movement. You're not going to change a country overnight, and you're not going to change it when people know what's going on. You're going to change it in darkness and over a long course of time. I mean, I'm thankful our founding fathers gave us the country we have, because our constitutional rights are so strong. If they weren't as strong as they were, we'd be a socialist nation 20 years ago. But I fear we're on the cusp of that because of apathy and this mentality of, let's not talk about it because I don't want to offend someone.
Thank you. And Ms. Fletter?
I want to speak to what he said, because so many people in the church especially are not getting involved. And it's for what you said, you know, the church has been taught that they're not supposed to get involved in politics. And it's more than a disservice. It's really very sad, because a retired pastor taught me not long ago. I thought this was very good advice. He said, Kim, we're a republic, and we have elected representation. And it is incumbent upon us, before we vote for someone, to know who we're voting for. And so in order to get involved with, to know who you're voting for, you have to get involved with politics.
Yes.
So it's, you know, it's a false teaching that the church tends to typically quote Romans 13 all the time. You know, that we're just to obey government and not get involved in politics. And I'm like, really? We're under a republic. That changes everything. And that is why the socialist Democrats, you know, they have their incrementalism side that takes 100 years goal to infiltrate. And Bella Dodd was a communist in the 30s and 40s for 19, I think, years. And she went before the HUAC committee, the House of Un-American Activities, and testified. And she told how they got a hold of the unions and the education system and the clergy. They knew they could get our political system and our economic system without a problem, but it was the church. And they began training up pastors. And by 1952, they had 600 Protestant pastors, communist pastors, infiltrating the Protestant denomination. And at the same time, Bella Dodd was training 1,100 priests to get into the Catholic Church. This is back in the 30s and 40s. And then they, you know, we have the National Council of Churches and what's the other one? World Council of Churches. And, you know, they've been working their goal a long time. Well, what we're seeing in our face today is the Marxist side. It's the Trotsky side. And people better wake up, because the Trotsky side isn't nice. And we've got 2 events going on adjacent to this county. Saturday with the Dahlonega Square situation, and then we've got Stacey Abrams coming.
Okay, could I read an online question?
Yes.
Why don't Republicans ever use Denmark or Sweden as examples of socialism? Instead, you only focus on bad examples of socialism like Venezuela. And how can you support an economic system based solely on greed when there are hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans in poverty?
Well, there's 2 questions there that I heard. Why don't Republicans use Denmark and Sweden to show dangers of socialism? It's not that we don't use Denmark and Sweden, because there are certainly issues in the country, like Kim talked about in her speech. But when you're fighting a war, and that's what this is, a war against socialism, against change, when you have to kind of pick your weapons to use. And examples like Venezuela, like Cuba, like the USSR, like China, like North Korea, are so prolific. They're the most profound examples. You literally have people who are unable to eat food on a regular basis. You have people who are being murdered by the government. People who have no rights in these countries. And we keep coming back to those because I mean, those are just part of my language. Those are hellhole places to live. I can't imagine being in Venezuela right now or in North Korea.
I think Kim answered the question.
Yeah, she did.
She did, because of all the taxes they make. And I ask you, hey, did Sweden put a man on the moon? Did they invent a computer system that runs 90% of the world's computers? Did a Dane do that? Did they invent the cure for polio? Socialism stifles inventiveness, entrepreneurship initiative. You're not going to have a socialist society that's going to progress the whole society like a democracy will, in which you have to have an incentive for these people, that the entrepreneurs and the engineers, whatever, aspire to. Wealth is a great motivator. So unless you have that, you're not going to have progress in technology, science, medicine that we have.
And I'll tell you one thing about Denmark and Sweden. Denmark and Sweden sit there. Denmark was very close to East Germany. Sweden was very close to the Soviet Union. Yet they never felt threatened. They were never threatened. Why not? Well, their defense budgets are much lower than ours because they're spending so much on their socialist redistribution. You know, the healthcare system is much more expensive there than here. Overall, everything is more expensive. Their standard of living is lower. Yet, when you look at the government budgets, you find that their defense spending is much lower as a percentage than ours is. Why? Aren't they worried? They're not worried, because who protects Sweden? Who protects Denmark? The United States military. If one of those countries were attacked, we'd be there. We're obligated under the NATO treaty. But they're not ready to defend themselves. You look at the states that are against Russia, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, and Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Now they're trying to protect themselves because they worry about Russia. But these other countries, these socialist countries, hey, it's a party. It's like a kid going to college. He doesn't worry about his student loans. He says, I'm gonna have a good time in 4 years of college.
He does after.
He does after. Someday they may have to pay up. But, right now, why should they spend a lot of money in defense when we're gonna do it for them? It just wouldn't make sense for them. Doesn't make sense for us either.